So, right, guys, welcome. Hope everybody's well. We've obviously got some old schoolers in here and a couple of new people as well. So, welcome. Right, starting obviously from the beginning here. What I always think is important on a Sunday is to treat it as like a prep day. So. I mean, I used to do it with my old company where I would, plan out the, week, like where my staff were obviously heading, what jobs I was going to do, what materials I was going to, need, and so don't think of trading as any different. You want to obviously, I'm a great believer you can't really predict that far ahead, especially at the moment, what's going to happen. But obviously, I'm going to sneeze. Excuse me. You can obviously, kind of get yourself all, all set up and ready, so that obviously what to be aware of, what things to obviously, look out for, stuff like that. So that's obviously one thing that, that I think is important. So starting off, we're gonna obviously I've made a PDF. I'd like to obviously do this from time to time, just obviously keeps to help me on track. But obviously, let's have a little look at, May. Don't know if my TradeZilla is gonna load. Of course it's not gonna load. Of course the first thing I come on isn't gonna load. TradeZilla. Sorry, everyone's joining and I'm trying to get on here. There we go. Log in. Should log in automatically. There we go. Right. So here we are here. Right. We're obviously here for, May. Had a pretty good, week last week. We've not had any trades kind of run away with us. It's been more about kind of, managing our, risk because we had obviously de-escalation and then escalation and then de-escalation all in one week last week, which obviously made it a bit trickier. So I'm going to go through this, and obviously it's important that we obviously understand. So how you guys obviously, know how I like to trade and keep things very, very, simple. I only really look at one time frame. I'm actually halfway through my kind of thesis on candles and obviously the kind of how and why they were created based on obviously what a guy from a hedge fund obviously told me, and I'm just in the middle of doing a bit of research and obviously confirming it all. So obviously these are all things, all reasons obviously why I kind of trade slightly different. So the great thing about macros, and obviously I know that it can take a bit of time to to get used to it. But obviously, the great thing about macros is that it's printed data. All right, so you can obviously get it pretty much right as long as you can understand it. We had obviously a bit of a different Friday, and obviously I'm going to go through this because I want everyone to obviously understand. We had obviously great non-farm payroll data, but why didn't the dollar pump? So these are obviously all things about trying to understand the kind of the ways of reading macros, and then also trend, and then for entering I'll work a little bit on liquidity too. All right, so first things first, what I go through every, Sunday evening is obviously I want to know, what's happening, what do I need to be aware of? You don't have to understand it, you just have to be aware of it, and obviously you want to I always describe, trading, news. Like some people, and I know obviously recently, probably the last, 3 months, there's been this, full port for obviously, interest rate, decisions, full port accounts for, non-farm payroll. That's not how you trade. It's not cool. There's obviously no longevity in it. And I think if I look at myself in the beginning, say quarter of my trading, whenever I used to full port any kind of news event, I'd get it wrong. I think if I always did the opposite to what I did at the beginning, I'd have made a lot more, money. And obviously that's common. Obviously, I went through this in my boot camp. I have got a video actually. I've done the charity donation today. So well done to everyone. We actually raised 1,600, and I've doubled it so to 3.2K. So brilliant for the make a wish charity, and I'll put that video in as obviously proof a bit later on. So, right, Monday, like I'd said here, news, you don't have to understand it, you just have to be aware of it. Monday is all about impact, all right? So, that's obviously why I don't ever, recommend anyone trading, Sunday evenings. Yes, I hear stories of everyone going, yeah, I caught it right. It was just right. But I never hear them a week or two later when they've, potentially not obviously done as great, potentially blown an account. To me, I think about my mindset, and obviously, although it would be great to obviously take on that, risk, at the beginning of the week, I think I always think about now about the worst case, scenario. So I don't want my trading week, my trading month to be over on a, Sunday evening. All right. So that's why I stay completely clear. I'm not even tempted. I might have a glance at the dollar to see how it's opened, but I don't even tend to, kind of, look at it. So that's obviously one thing that I kind of tend to stay away from. I like to see how markets have acted during Asia, and then that's going to help us with a general direction on a Monday for obviously, London Open, which obviously we start trading at 6:30 in the morning, so bright and early. But yeah, that's obviously what I'd like to try and do. So Mondays, well, obviously haven't got much happening. Yeah, yeah, yes, we've got some speeches later on, but these won't really impact our trading tomorrow. So I'm not really worried about anything tomorrow. Tuesday, what have we got coming up? We've obviously got not a lot actually until 1:30. So, CPI data, inflation data, that's the only thing that markets are going to be looking at. And obviously I've broken it all down. So we'll go through the PDF in a bit, and then obviously we'll go through some charts. But obviously, so Tuesday, you don't want to be in a trade coming into, CPI data. You want to try and be out, let the wave of the data be created in whichever direction, and then we ride it, so we always want to wait for these waves to be created. We don't want to try and guess, where they're going to happen and why, so probably, yeah, Tuesday 1:30 is going to be pretty key. Well, Wednesday, obviously, we got GDP data for Euro. And then we obviously got more, obviously, inflation data. We got PPI data for the US. All right. And obviously, remember, going through this will help you in regards to rights. So we obviously know there's going to be high liquidity on the US dollar. There's going to be high liquidity on euro, all right? Because we've obviously got GDP data. Not a lot else that I'm interested in. Thursday, got obviously GDP for the pound. So now we've got euro, US dollar, pound. All right, we've got lots of data out Thursday morning. So we're going to be aware of this and going to try and trade around it. And then obviously we've got retail sales and jobless claims, for the US dollar. Moving into Friday, we have got some manufacturing data for New York, and that's about it, So there's obviously three key pairs here, and obviously that's when you've obviously got to then, identify, right, you know what, I need to keep an eye on dollar, pound, euro. Because obviously it's not like, for example, we've got heavy pound data that Thursday, but what we can see happening is this data being priced in. All right, so whatever the predicted is, GDP, then obviously we could see that potentially being priced in on Wednesday. So you've got to be aware of obviously what's happening. Make notes about it. If you've got your desk, just have a post-it note of the three main currencies that obviously you're looking out for this week and potential danger days is obviously what I used to do. Potentially the day before, obviously, we know that Asia's, not going to move heavily. So obviously, Thursday morning, Asia's not going to move heavily. So potentially we might see pound being priced in, New York on Wednesday. All right. Right. Going through this PDF that I've, made, and obviously feel free. I normally go through it pretty quickly, but obviously it will be posted in. But obviously explains, so Sunday macro, why didn't the dollar pump properly after NFP? So Friday we had obviously non-farm payroll, which is basically one of the biggest pieces of US jobs data every month. Now, normally when jobs data comes out strong, people expect the dollar to pump because a strong economy usually means the Federal Reserve might keep interest rates higher for longer. So obviously everyone knows here higher interest rates is good because it means, if other countries, other companies, other economies are obviously investing in that country, they're obviously going to get a higher interest rate. All right. But this is where people get trapped just because the number is good. That doesn't mean the market has to keep buying US dollar. Yes, jobs numbers beat expectations, so feel free to go back and have a look at that. But markets was looking deeper than just the headline number. The wages data wasn't crazy strong. Unemployment didn't suddenly collapse, and there were still signs that parts of the economy are slowing slightly underneath the surface. So instead of, you've always got to be thinking about what's the overall view of the, market. So instead of markets thinking, whereabouts, sorry, there we go. Yeah, wow, the Fed needs to become even more aggressive. The markets are always more like, okay, so the economy that looks, stable, but there's nothing here massively changing what the Fed is already thinking. So sometimes, well, when you get good news, all right, but it's not great, across the board, especially obviously our expectations. So for dollar to fly, we obviously, the reason it's been pumping is because everyone's been predicting interest rates to be going higher, which is for better, all right, because everyone's getting more for their money. Don't think about dollar and currencies in the, smaller, time frame. So like us, obviously, in the UK, wanting to get a mortgage for a house or wanting to get some finance for a car or a bank loan. Don't think about us. Think about the billions that potentially might get pumped into, UK bonds, US bonds, because interest rates are higher. So the more money being pumped into a country, the better. All right. So that's kind of how you've got to start to think about it. All right. The important thing beginners need to understand, markets, the market does not just trade numbers, the market also trades expectations. So obviously this is what I'm explaining. The expectation is because, the Federal Reserve are obviously looking at every single, bit of news coming out like an absolute hawk. And obviously they're then thinking, right, you know what? We're not under as much pressure now to raise interest rates. Obviously, the market then views that from obviously their eyes, because obviously we've got to think, the guys doing this have been doing this a long time. They've been doing it their whole life. It's their career. So they can kind of understand how the Fed is thinking. And obviously, the more you get into, macros, the more you're going to understand that, yeah, I kind of I understand what the Fed might be thinking. They're obviously not going to want to be raising interest rates, which is going to pump the dollar because jobs data is better. The employment market is under control, the jobs market. So this is one of the biggest things beginners struggle with. Retail traders think good news by US dollar, but professional traders think, does this news actually change the bigger picture? Yeah. All right. So, you've always got to be thinking, that's obviously why, what potentially might happen. So, what actually matters this week? And obviously, this is one thing that obviously we need to look out for. And obviously why we, hop on a, Sunday. And so the market now wants to know. basically how much pressure is the Federal Reserve under? Is inflation staying sticky, or is it finally cooling? Because that is what controls the Fed. So this week, the biggest thing to watch out for is CPI data. All right, the CPI is inflation data. If inflation comes out hotter than expected, yields rise, dollar rise, gold can struggle, and obviously markets may start pricing less rate cuts. If inflation comes in cooler, the dollar can weaken, gold can push higher, stocks could obviously potentially push higher, and obviously markets may start pricing more rate cuts again. All right, so CPI data, which is on Tuesday, is the most important thing about this week. Let me just grab some water. Right. So, moving on to obviously big grey cloud number two. All right, Iran, Israel. Obviously, I'm putting Israel because, you know, I don't know. I think it's more Israel's war than the US's war now. But anyway, another thing the market is watching heavily right now is the Middle East. The reason this matters is because of oil. All right, so I'm telling you guys all the time, we're not trading oil, but we're interested in the price of it. If tension between Iran and Israel escalates properly, oil prices will spike. So that's the real telltale whether there is a escalation. All right, you just look at oil because oil is the biggest driver. It's become the kind of liquid gold of 20 to 26 because of because of all of this which is happening. All right, if oil spikes, inflation rise, central banks become more cautious. What ends up happening? All right, we'll obviously see, US dollar pumping, we'll see oil pumping, and then we'll see yields pumping too. All right. So blah blah blah. Main lesson from Friday. I'm not going to go through that. What I'll be personally watching this week, I'll be mainly watching, CPI data, dollar reaction, yields, all prices, any Iran Israel escalation. Um, yeah, and whether markets stay risk on or switch to risk off. All right. Bottom line, NFP was good, but not good enough to completely change the bigger macro picture. The jobs market still looks stable, but inflation is still the real driver. That's why this week is less about jobs and more about inflation, CPI, oil, yields, geopolitics, risk, and sentiment. All right, so I'm going to put this in the group after. Feel free to, go through it. Let's just go through a couple of these questions, and then obviously I'll get back to it. So, Larry, when key news announcements come out, price can swing wildly in both directions. When do you determine the direction has been set for the wave direction for a trade? So I pretty much know which way it's gonna go. Obviously, once the news comes out, that's why, for example, Friday we got our trades, straight out. Yes, we didn't obviously manage to get into anything on Friday because it moved too quickly. But obviously, yeah, that's why. All right, so, once and it's about spending a bit of time, but once you understand, the kind of news and what to look out for, it'll really, really help you. All right. But why did gold Noel here? But why did gold pump so quickly? Because the dollar was weak. All right, so that's why. So if you look here, 130, bang, but nothing really happened. I was expecting dollar to obviously to come, but sorry, gold to come back into this area and then potentially pump. But what this tells me, and obviously gold has been consolidating quite a bit. It hasn't really moved that crazy. So I mean, you can even ignore this, but we're kind of being squeezed a bit here. All right, it hasn't really moved up a ton or moved down a ton either, so gold's not really, yeah, it isn't really doing as much. I think we've been so used to gold, and I'm going to zoom out here. We've been so used to, there's been so many expert gold traders here, all right? But if you look at the market, it's been so easy to trade. You could have had no experience at all and just bought gold, and you would have thought that you were an expert, whereas we're coming back to kind of these times now, these 2020, these kind of pre-COVID times where gold's not flying. All right, gold's actually becoming harder to trade. So and we do have to be aware of that. So yeah, right. Why don't you trade oil? I personally feel like oil is a bit of a, meme coin. I feel like it's completely manipulated by the bigger powers, so it's not something that I enjoy to trade. At least we know the currency, it's very, very hard to kind of manipulate it to the point where you can, manipulate oil. I get asked this question a lot of the time. Obviously, when there's no, escalation, de-escalation war, just if you're ever on the coast of the UK, have a look out and obviously have a look at, spot all the tankers in, certain points, just, staying out there. All right, and that they'd stay out there for a reason. Is to control the markets. All right, they can supply and demand. It's easy to control if supply is not quite reached market yet, but demand's still high. Yeah. Trump, let's have a look. Trump is going to China Thursday, Friday this week. Potentially, he'll want to push Iran to a resolution as his pushback visit once already due to Iran. Possible big moves early part of this week. So, yeah, I think this is an interesting one. So, China obviously want this over. China obviously, do trade with Iran. There's obviously rumors that obviously they have been supplying them, weapons. So I think Trump going to China, he's just going to want them on side, So I think there's more of a chance of because you're not going to change their mind. I don't think they're far off, if I'm honest, but obviously that's my opinion. I think the world wants to see this conflict, kind of sorted because the reason this conflict started, like none of those reasons have been accomplished. It's just been all about oil, and obviously that's the horrible thing. So yeah, I think look, there's markets are going to be so volatile anyway with anything to do with this. But obviously, until we get a resolution, then obviously we are, still always going to be in danger. Right, last one before we move on to the charts. Amir, Islam, is silver good to trade? Um, I've traded it before, quite a lot. I don't particularly, like it. I think it summed up that there were so many silver traders early on in this year, because it was pumping, and then it knocked out 30%, So if you look at the total silver kind of market, if you look at the total, so it was from say here, right the way here. So we got about yeah. So if we were to think about in 1 week, I think it knocked out 30% of the total market. All right. Now, is that something that you want to trade? Because if you haven't got a stop loss, then you're going to be earning the broker a bit of money. All right. So yeah, yeah, I think look, we can obviously understand gold, silver. I still think it's, it's quite hard to get the bigger picture. It will track gold to a point, but obviously it's like gold on, steroids, sometimes. And so, you've obviously just got to be a bit aware of it. So, right, let's obviously now hop onto the dollar. Let's, first of all see how this week ended. I don't see this week as really doing anything. We obviously had these two lows here. We couldn't breach it. We're almost kind of opened up where we finished. It tried moving higher, it couldn't. It tried pushing lower, it couldn't. So we're obviously hovering around this 98, which is a pretty comfortable stage. Like I'm honestly pretty comfortable with dollar holding this area. So anywhere here, unless I get a big push, I'll be buying from here. So look at this more on a kind of lower time frame here, and if we're trying to spot trend, I would call this a bit of a, mix kind of trend here. You could argue, something like this, but then it's this bit here which gets everything a bit all over the place. So I would argue that we're stuck in a bit of consolidation here. We're not going to break below here. Potentially might do Tuesday, but I think the confidence, will kind of hold. I think they obviously want the dollar high. Obviously naturally oil is traded in the dollar, and obviously gold is traded in the dollar. So you also have to think about that angle too. So obviously the more of that that's being traded, the higher the price, the more dollars that are being spent. So obviously naturally that's going to lift everything. That's why I don't think that the dollar will drop below here. Yields also, we did have a major catch up last week. This gap here. All right, major catch up because originally we obviously had dollar did something like this and it was trading here, and obviously yields did something like this, and it was still trading here. So obviously this gap here caught yields up, and obviously it's now trading at the same kind of price, area level as what the dollar is, So that's the interesting thing. I will be watching this quite closely. I want to see obviously how yields open. Why are yields important? Yields are obviously government bonds, and they're basically, if you think about them as the big money coming into the US dollar. All right, that's obviously how you've got to look at them. That's the big money floating in. And obviously the higher the yields hold, the more confidence big money has. That's then going to drag the dollar up. So got to obviously be aware of this. Now, for those of you guys who are pretty, new here, we obviously trade everything against the US dollar. All right, and I trade pound USD, euro USD, AD USD, gold, and USDJPY. Why? Because I've only really got to understand the dollar. All right. We've also got a very, very strict routine where I'd like to wait for obviously market to come to, me. So I'll draw out my entries, and normally I'll draw, an entry, zone. All right, and I'll be waiting for price to come into this, say hypothetically we were looking at something like this. I'd use buy and sell orders. I'll be waiting for price to come in to then reject from here. I don't worry about candles. I'm not interested. Because I like to trade with, freedom. And obviously me spending an hour in the morning, posting everything with buy and sell limits gives me freedom. All right. And then all I've got to do is to, monitor them when they trigger. And then obviously in the afternoon, same thing. I'll obviously monitor everything, put my entries in, wait for them to trigger. If they trigger, great, I'll monitor them. If they don't trigger, cool, we're chilling out. So obviously that's how I like to to trade because it stops me, second guessing, jumping in. The more you can pre-plan stuff, the better. All right. So, for example, where do I w want the dollar to be trading? Well, there's two places here. All right. I either want, if I'm honest with you, I want the dollar trading here. All right. Around 98, or I want the dollar trading here. That would make me really happy. One of these, because it's a nice, obviously, for those of you who don't do it already, mark obviously a key level up every 500 on the dollar. It'll really, really help you. All right. So, pound, little bit intermittent. Obviously, I use the 2 hour because it's an intra-day ch chart. We've got to do something special, I think, to break here. But again, it's a little bit messy. We've obviously got higher highs, but then we've also got lower lows. And then obviously equal highs. Euros very, very similar, very, very messy. All right. Oh, I'm just gonna get rid of this. Put this back on. There we go. Dollars also very, very messy. Can you guys hear me? I just want to check. So I had my daughter put her headphones on and it bleeped in. Okay, cool. Cheers. So yeah, Euro same, Aussie, same. Everything's looking like it's trending to the upside here, but we do have, major, ceilings here. All right. So we've also got to be aware something big has to happen, like Tuesday, to break above this. So there's more chance and opportunity that we might tail off to the downside here. All right, and USDJPY, I've been staying away from it a bit. It's just horrible because we're having these crazy downward candles. That tells me there's a lot of downward pressure here. Not many, there'll be quite a few in, sales here. I said that I spoke to one of my friends who works in the hedge fund space in the risk department for Deutsche Bank, and obviously he'd said that there's a lot of orders here around 160, and I don't think these orders are closing. I just think this is obviously people taking a chance, trying to buy back up, but none of these guys in the cells are closing out. So that's why you have these crazy big candles here, because as soon as these guys pump up a bit and they take their profit off the table, we smashed straight down here quickly. That smashed straight down here quickly. But this is obviously holding well. There's clearly buyers here trying to buy from here. But once they're taking their bit of profit off, whack, it's happening so quickly. So we obviously that's why I've been staying away. And obviously gold, I actually like gold where it is. I like that it's consolidating here. There's a lot of orders here. So it's going to be pretty easy. Just got to wait for a breakout here. All right, just got to wait for a breakout. But we are obviously waiting one probably until Tuesday. So expect some kind of a slingshot on gold on Tuesday. And yeah, whether we're going to get escalation or de-escalation, hopefully, yeah, like we said, hopefully China can talk some, sense into Trump and it will, start to kind of chill out a bit. But obviously that's what we're kind of, waiting for here. So, right, I'm going to open I'm going to open the floor up for any questions. And yeah, we'll take it from there. Larry, is the gold copy resilient enough to cope with ranging price? Yep, yeah, it's no problem because it trades within zones. All right, so I'm going to show you hypothetically. We might have three zones marked up for London, and like we've seen for many a time, it only needs one runner, and it'll obviously make up for everything. We've always got a 70 pip, stop loss. So yeah, no problems. Is silver good to trade? I think I've answered that one, but yeah, no, I don't recommend it. I don't recommend silver to trade. Right, let's have a look here. Right. Hi Dan, this will be my first week. Thanks for your patience and getting me started. I'm only using my phone and it's all new to me. Should I just follow your instructions in the morning and go steady, not worrying about setting, buy and selling, etc. So yeah, w what I always say to anyone is whenever you're doing something new, take it easy. All right. First week, 100%, whatever you're doing, if you're not used to it, take it easy, reduce risk. Don't obviously expose anything because it's going to take you a, week to kind of get used to it. But I do make things very, very easy. I've identified everyone's, weak habits of trading different pairs, trading different times, not obviously holding, stop losses, not having targets, over trading, so obviously all of everything that I do implements that so that won't, we know normally out of the five pairs, I might mark up three. And obviously they've got, fixed entries in. So, if you obviously want to take them, brilliant. If you don't, it's no problem at, at all. Ken, if it de-escalates, we expect gold to pump. Yes, yeah, so gold is probably, you've got to think if we get de-escalation, there's still a bit of uncertainty. All right, so there'll be a big proportion of money will go into gold. One thing that surprised me is, stocks, and obviously this has been because of the price of the dollar, but obviously stocks are at all-time highs. All of them are. All right, so we've got, US 30 all-time highs, and obviously you have to identify everything here. SPX 500 all-time highs, US 100 all-time highs. All right, stock market's pumping. So that means there is a bit of risk. It's just which kind of, sectors are obviously flying. And you guys can probably guess it, the energy, sector at the moment is flying. Do you see gold potentially drop more in Asian Open? I mean, like I'd said, I'd be guessing here. So, like I'd say about gold, it's kind of trapped here. All right, so it's trapped between the two. I think we're going to be trapped here until Tuesday. And then obviously it'll be Tuesday's data that will fly us either to the upside or to the downside. Yeah, that's what I think. Sorry, I meant stop losses, not buying or selling. Uh, Stop losses, yes, we always put, stop losses in. What I tend to do is so for example here on gold, our stop loss might be here because I want to see a change in trend. Right, but obviously I have been keeping my stops a bit tighter. About the trading view, how do you use it? Free version or paid? Is your trading account on Vantage connected to trading view? No, I absolutely, I've tried trading on trading view. I hate it. So I don't want to have to carry my laptop round. I'd like to do all my prep on trading view. But obviously, then I like to, monitor my trades by hand. It means, I can do school runs, I could do, go and play golf, anything. So, yeah, that's obviously what I tend to do. But yeah, trading view, you can start on the free version. You got to think you need some kind of investment in, so I think I've got basically the basic one because I don't need any more. So you can. I've had plus, I've had premium, I've had ultimate, but if you're not using it, there's no point in having it. But I don't think 12.95 is too much of an investment, for you to invest in your trading. Can you use the gold copier and do manual gold as well? Yes, the gold copier just ticks over. So there's no problems at all with that. How do I get access to the gold copier? Drop me a message, and obviously I'll help you. Why do you use FXCM? FXCM is just, known in the industry, that, it's just, known as, it's on TradingView, it's relatively kind of, neutral spreads. So I've always used it. Lots of the white label brokers all would take their pricing off of FXCM. Neil, what are your thoughts on Bitcoin? Let's have a look. Well, there's, talk from obviously Trump, in the background. That's, someone else to keep an eye on about Bitcoin. I actually come out of Bitcoin completely, because I'm just not too sure about it right now. So yeah, but you can't argue here. Trend is to the upside. 60. How I don't think it's ever going to drop much lower than 60. But obviously it could be surprised. But again, crypto is subjective. All right, it's completely subjective. It's all about advertisements, promotions, marketing, communities. I'm staying away from it for a bit. Yeah, but obviously Bitcoin, if you actually do a bit of research on Bitcoin, it's got, on paper, yes, I can see Bitcoin at, 500K, million. But I can also see Bitcoin at zero, because no one knows who owns it. Is there a way that they can regulate it? Obviously, I know that governments are trying to obviously regulate exchanges, which they are. So if you've got money on Coinbase, Binance, Kraken, then obviously governments, can obviously ask to view your data, and they have to agree. So the kind of fluidity of crypto has kind of changed, slightly. Um, Let's have a look here. Will Dan do the broker take off me for every transaction, or will it be monthly? So it all depends on what type of account that you have. Adam, hi, this is new to me. I really wanted to learn for a beginner like me, which is better to do in trading, copy trading or manual trading. Obviously, manual will always be better, and it's something that I encourage. Even if you paper trade manually, all right, you want to start to understand, because every trade is different, completely different. So you want to try and understand what kind of a trader you are. And obviously you only do that by, which is what I spoke about on the, market, the boot camp. You want to try and trying to get as much data on you as a trader, so obviously journal, because obviously that's one thing that, no one journals, but obviously the more data that you've got on yourself, the better off you are. So I'm gonna try and skip through these quickly because I've got to get my youngest to bed. Yes, I've got to get you to sleep. She turned around and looked at me. I'm currently using 0.05, a lot size on the gold copy on a small 2.4 account. What's the maximum loss and benefit? I'd probably yeah, well, maximum loss, now that we've edited stuff, so far, I think we've been about 200 down on 0.05. So yeah, that will be 600. Noel, do you think there is a lot of manipulation in the price at the moment, or is it just me with my tinfoil hat on? Tinfoil hat. No, so yes, I wouldn't say it's manipulation. I'd say no one, really knows what's, happening. There's a lot of protective uh positions, and obviously lots of hedge funds hedging, because it's very, very hard, so yeah, that's obviously one thing to be aware of. Even the big guys that I've spoken to are, not, not finding it hard. They're just trying to. They're finding it hard to find that edge, in the markets, because obviously oil has been the initial edge, but obviously now it's getting a bit a bit higher risk. And then obviously last question here. How long do you sit in the live market when trading morning and afternoon? So I'd sit down for an hour before I'm looking at what I'm trading in the morning and in the afternoon. I then document everything. So I pre-plan. All right, I'm a big pre-planner. I want market to do what I want it. I don't want to try and guess. So yeah, I probably don't. I'll monitor it briefly. Obviously, if a trade triggers, then yeah, I've got certain times where I'll be monitoring it a bit more. But if I'm honest, the more pre-planning you do, the less you're going to kind of, monitor it because what you're expecting to happen's happened, it's triggered, and then it's a case of just obviously waiting to see obviously what happens after that. But no, appreciate everyone joining. If you're obviously not in the inner circle, then drop us a message if you've enjoyed it. But obviously this is the kind of detail that we go into, and obviously what makes us completely different to everybody else. Obviously in a circle crew. I'll see you, bright and early in the morning. My daughter's got her SATs this week, so I don't think I'll be doing lives at 8. I'll probably do them about 9 because I'll be back. So yeah. Right, have a great evening. And yeah, let's smash it. Let's absolutely smash it. Have a good one, guys.